Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon. Today we're going to be ranking the 6 main archetypes in the game in terms of ability to carry in solo queue. So if you don't know kind of what the main archetypes are, or at least what I would say the main ones are, and this is not in the order, but the main ones would be Marksmen, Mages, Assassins, Tanks, Bruisers, and Enchanters. So of those 6, we're going to be ranking them from best to worst to carry for solo queue, because people often ask what type of things they should play for solo queue. And while roles is one important thing, and I've made a video on the best roles to climb in solo queue that you can look up if you want to find that, it's also important to understand the types of champions you're playing. Because of course, even if you're playing mid lane, you're not going to carry the same if you're playing, some mid laners compared to others. And so getting right into the worst role overall to carry with, definitely for me is going to be Enchanters. Main reason for Enchanters not being that great, they're very, very team reliant. Of course, you're typically only really going to play them in bot lane. A couple you can maybe play in mid or something, but they're pretty much all very team reliant. They require you to have someone playing well. You don't really get to make the decisions. You don't get to engage. You're kind of just there for your team, so you don't really have any carry potential for solo queue, which is what this ranking is for. Now, if this was duo queue or trio, and you're duo or trio with some really good players, of course these champions become much more useful. But when it comes to solo queue, generally climbing on Enchanters is going to be extremely difficult, especially due to the fact that a lot of people play duo and trio, and you'll match against them if you're playing ranked. If you were only in solo queue, you might be able to climb on them, but since, even when you play solo queue, you play against a lot of duo and trio, very, very hard to climb. Up to number 5 now are going to be Tanks. So tanks don't have the same issue of Enchanters, because tanks, they get to actually engage and make the plays. They have a lot of agency, a lot of decision-making power. But the same as Enchanters, and you're going to see this as a common theme throughout ranking these different archetypes, they're very reliant on their team as well, but for a different reason. So when it comes to tanks, they have to rely on their team to actually deal the damage. No matter how well you play as a tank, if your teammates don't know how to farm properly, don't know how to get the proper damage off, they don't know how to keep track of spells, all those types of things, you're not going to be very useful. But unlike Enchanters, you have more agency, which is why they're still a bit better, and you have the ability to protect your carries, which is definitely a positive as well. So it's not like they're awful for solo queue. Like, in my opinion, you can climb pretty well solo queue on any of the top 5, and the only one that solo queue is really hard to climb on is going to be Enchanters. And again, it depends on the role, which is why there's Assassins, there's Tanks, there's whatever in most roles. So you're going to also have to pay attention to what role you're playing, which again, you can look at the role ranking. So I just want to make that clear as well. On to number 4 now, we have Marksmen. So obviously Marksman champions are typically played in ADC, but you can play champions like Corki or Lucian in mid lane. You can play champions like Nyla or Kindred in ADC, or in jungle rather. And so there's still a lot of different roles you can play them in. The reason that Marksman's a bit higher is because if you understand farm really well, you understand how to get to your 3 or 4 item power spikes, you're always going to be relevant in the game, and you're always going to have the ability to carry. All you really need is one player making an engage, and half the time your teammates are going to be too eager to engage. They're going to make lots of engages because they're not very smart. And so the difference is, even though you're still reliant on team as an ADC, or as a Marksman rather, a lot of times you're going to have someone who's just filling that role naturally. Even if they're not a tank, they make an engage because they just go in stupidly. That distracts people similarly. Oftentimes you have Enchanters. Enchanters are much more popular, and a lot of Marksmen really benefit from having an Enchanter on their team, especially when they're building Ardent Sensor or those different types of things. And again, you just obviously get to deal the most damage of pretty much any class. So if you're positioning well, you're pretty much always going to get that damage off. You can have a very consistent playstyle, which is going to allow you to climb pretty nice in solo queue. But again, you're still very, very reliant on those engages, and you don't have any agency. So the same way that Enchanters don't really have much agency for engages, it's very similar with Marksmen, especially early game. Later on in the game, Marksmen often have enough tools to actually do a lot themselves, to self-peel depending on the champion you're playing. They have access to a lot of mobility, like for example, a champion like Kai'Sa gets access to her invisibility, or things like this, right? But when it comes to the early to mid game, you have very, very little agency, and that makes it sometimes hard to carry in solo queue, as a majority of the ADCs, or the Marksmen. Number 3 is Assassins. So Assassins are a little less reliant on your team making really good engages or peeling for you. So Assassins do have to be really patient. They can't go in right away, but unlike a Marksman, they don't really need someone to peel for them. Like, if you think about it, every Marksman has a lot of mobility. Talon can get away from someone with his ultimate or his third ability. Zed can use his clones to maneuver around team fights, so he's not going to get caught out randomly. And basically, if you think of a majority of assassins, Echo with his ultimate, Akali with her W, they all have ways to escape. And so you're not reliant on your team peeling for you or protecting you in the same way that a marksman is reliant on that. And you still have similar carry potential because you get to farm a lot, you get to deal the damage in the fights, and you have a lot of decision making when it comes to target priority and shutting down the enemy carry. If you're an assassin and the enemy has a fed ADC, that's your job to kill them, and so you can oftentimes shut down the enemy carry, which allows you to win a lot of games. And again, because you get access to a lot of gold as an assassin, especially if you're playing in jungle or mid lane, you have just a pretty easy way to generally carry, which is why I would say that assassins are definitely up there when it comes to carry potential and overall at number 3. At number 2, I would say we have mages, and honestly, this list was like harder to make when I got this idea to make this video than I thought. Like pretty much 1 through 4, I could see people wanting to switch. But the reason that I have mages at number 2 is because they're very safe in a majority of the game. Like in the early game, they can farm up pretty consistently. They're actually usually pretty good laners. They're not like stomping lane, but they're always consistent. It's pretty hard to really like fall super far behind on a mage. They have access to some OP runes right now, like the inspiration tree, or I think that's what the blue tree is called. It's pretty OP, and so that generally leads to a lot of success just with the Seed Jar Sweet Tooth combo. And then in the late game, you scale the same way that Marksman scales, but you usually have better ways to protect yourself and don't have to get as close to do your damage. So like most Marksmen, they have to be auto-attacking constantly in order to get their damage off and kind of be useful. But a mage can walk up, use a rotation of spells, and then just walk away. So like it's a lot less dangerous, which means that you're not as in need of peel or protection from your teammates. A lot of mages have better poke as well, which means that they can, again, just deal damage from afar. They don't have to rely on their team engaging for them. It's just a lot safer generally, and they still have most of the upside that an ADC has of being able to carry games through damage, through farming properly, and again, the runes that they have access to are very strong. And then finally, we have Bruisers as the best archetype, in my opinion, to carry in solo queue. And I think this is definitely something a lot of people disagree with, but as I was saying, with the majority of the carry roles, they don't really have agency to make a lot of the decisions or engages themselves. And as I said about the supportive roles like tanks and enchanters, they don't have the potential to 1v9 a fight or do a bunch of damage. But bruisers have the potential to do any of these things. They still are strong enough to do damage, like Darius, for example, even Garen. Like these champions do a bunch of damage. They're still really good in 1v1s. And then they also have the potential to engage. Most of them have access to some type of crowd control in one way or another. So they can make some type of engage. They can itemize in many ways. They can buy tank items in order to counter AP champions, AD champions, attack speed based champs, anything like that. They can build a bunch of damage if the enemy is really squishy and they want to play an assassin playstyle. They're usually strong laners. If you just think about a majority of bruisers, Renekton's a strong laner, Urgot's a strong laner. Now my mind's blanking. Darius is a decent laner. Garen's a good laner. That's pretty solid. Like all these champions are good in lane for the most part. If you're playing them in lane, if you're playing them in jungle, they're usually good mid and late game. Vi is a very good early to mid game champion and still has an assassin-like playstyle later on in the game, going on to squishies or targeting enchanters. So they pretty much can do everything, which means, yes, maybe you're not going to have the hard 1v9 carry potential of a mage or a marksman. You're going to have the consistency, which is what matters for solo queue. It matters in solo queue that you can carry over a long period of time, not that you can hard carry 1 or 2 or 3 games, of every 10 or 20 games. And so that to me is really what makes Bruisers just so OP for solo queue games. And so yeah, overall, that's kind of my list. Again, just to quickly go through: number 6, Enchanters, 5 tanks, 4 marksmen, 3 assassins, 2 mage, and then 1 is Bruisers, in my opinion. I'm honestly pretty curious to hear your guys' opinion on this. I kind of randomly got the idea to make this video, and I thought it was kind of an interesting topic. And I hadn't really thought too much about it apart from right now. So let me know what you guys typically play too, like what you feel like just works the best for you, that type of thing, and what you thought about my ranking. As always, I do coaching for $25 an hour. As a top 10 on the server, 4 different seasons, playing autofill for 3 of those seasons. I feel like I can provide you guys with some value. Just DM me on Discord, Talon1169, or through the link in the description to my Discord server below. and I'll see you guys later.